He made the three most powerful women on the planet shiver with pleasure. Not in the way you're thinking, but in a way the world would never forget. And the strange part? Before that night, everyone believed he was nothing more than a useless madman. The twin sons of VelThara burned mercilessly overhead, casting long shadows across the ancient arena. Sand, stained by centuries of blood, shifted under his bare feet as he struggled to stand. His breath came ragged, each inhale sharp like broken glass slicing through his lungs. He didn't know where he was. Worse, he didn't know who he was. The roar of thousands echoed around him, a storm of voices crashing against the hollow walls of his mind. Words blurred into noise until one name, or rather, a title, cut through the chaos. The Forgotten One. It wasn't a name. It was a sentence. He lifted his head slowly, strands of sweat-soaked hair clinging to his face. High above, balconies carved from obsidian stone overflowed with spectators' alien faces twisted in excitement, mockery, and morbid curiosity. Look at him. The last remnant of a failed war. Does he even remember how to hold a blade? Laughter. Jeers. But beneath it all, fear. A quiet, unspoken fear that perhaps even shattered. There was something dangerous still lingering beneath his vacant gaze. His legs trembled as he took a step forward, knees buckling under the weight of exhaustion and confusion. His body moved out of instinct, not memory. Each scar along his skin whispered stories he couldn't recall, stories the crowd knew better than he did. Somewhere deep within, a flicker of something stirred. Not a thought. Not a memory. Just survival. The ground shifted beneath him as a platform rose from the center of the arena. Standing upon it was a figure who silenced the mob without a word. Lady Ceres. Her emerald skin gleamed under the harsh light, every movement radiating authority born from generations of dominance. Clad in ceremonial armor that blended elegance with lethality, she was less a person and more a force of nature. His blurred vision sharpened not from recognition, but from an innate understanding, predator. As he stumbled closer, his foot caught on a jagged stone hidden beneath the sand. His balance failed him. Time seemed to slow as he reached out blindly, desperate to avoid collapsing before the eyes of thousands. Fate, or perhaps something crueler, guided his hand. His fingers closed around the smooth, exposed shoulder of Lady Ceres. The arena gasped as one. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then came the murmurs, growing louder with every passing second. He touched her. By the old laws, that's a challenge. The Forgotten One steadied himself, blinking in confusion as his hand remained upon the woman who could end his life with a mere gesture. Realizing his mistake, he pulled back slowly, raising both hands in a wordless apology. Lady Ceres didn't strike him down. Instead, she turned those piercing golden eyes locking onto his. She searched for defiance, for arrogance, for the foolish pride that most men displayed before their doom. But she found none. There was no confidence in his gaze. No calculated bravado. What she saw was raw, unfiltered instinct, the desperate will to stand, to breathe, to endure. And that, more than any declaration of strength, piqued her interest. You don't even know what you've done, do you? Her voice was soft, but it carried across the arena like a blade drawn from its sheath. He said nothing. What could he say when he didn't even understand the question? A faint smile ghosted across her lips, not of amusement, but of anticipation. By ancient right, your touch is a claim, a demand for trial. The crowd erupted once more, half in disbelief, half in bloodthirsty delight. She stepped closer, her presence suffocating yet strangely magnetic. Most who challenge me come armed with ego and empty boasts. Her eyes narrowed. But you come with nothing but the will to survive. He swallowed hard, his throat dry as ash. There were no memories to anchor him, no strategies to recall. Yet, beneath the weight of her gaze, something primal awakened. A voice not from memory, but from somewhere deeper whispered. Survive the trial, or die forgotten. Lady Ceres raised her hand, silencing the arena once more. Prepare him for the trials of the forgotten, she commanded. As guards approached, weapons drawn but cautious, he felt the cold grip of inevitability wrap around his chest. He didn't know his past. He didn't know his name. But as he was led away, one truth burned brighter than the twin suns above. He wasn't ready to die. And somewhere, deep in Lady Ceres' calculating gaze, she knew. He might just survive long enough to become something far more dangerous than a memory. He might become a legend. He didn't remember who he was. But the look in his eyes, the look of a man who had once stared down death itself, was something no amnesia could erase. He doesn't remember his name, but that gaze, the gaze of a warrior who once dared to challenge fate itself, no one can fake that. Darkness wasn't the absence of light. It was the presence of everything he didn't want to remember. When the Forgotten One opened his eyes, there was no arena, no crowd, no Lady Ceres. Only an endless void stretching in every direction, a suffocating blackness that felt less like a place and more like being trapped inside his own skull. A whisper echoed not from outside, but from within. Begin the trial of memory. The voice wasn't familiar. Nothing was. Yet his feet moved forward, bare soles touching something that felt like solid ground, though no surface could be seen. Each step sent ripples through the darkness, and with every ripple, fragments of something flickered to life around him. A scream. A flash of blue flame slicing through metal. The stench of burned flesh and ozone. He stumbled back as images bled from the void, half-formed, jagged like broken glass. A battlefield stretched before him, but it wasn't real. Soldiers with faces blurred beyond recognition clashed with monstrous figures of shadow and steel. In the center of it all stood himself. But not the hollow man he was now. This version of him moved like a force of nature, armor gleaming with alien insignias, a sword blazing with unnatural blue fire gripped in his hand. Each swing tore through enemies like they were paper caught in a storm. He watched, heart pounding, as his past self carved a path through chaos. The spectators in his mind, the ghosts of a forgotten war, chanted a name he couldn't hear, their voices muffled as if the universe itself conspired to keep his identity hidden. The vision shifted. Now he stood before a council, figures draped in gold and crimson robes, their faces masked, their judgment absolute. His past self knelt, bloodied but unbroken, as a verdict was delivered in cold, echoing tones. Too powerful. Too unpredictable. Erase him. Pain lanced through his skull as invisible hands gripped his mind, tearing memories away like flesh from bone. He dropped to his knees in the void, clutching his head as flashes of betrayal, fear, and rage surged through him. I was. The words wouldn't come. They didn't need to. The truth was scrawled across every fragment. He wasn't born for glory or honor. He was created. A living weapon. A tool forged for war, wielded until those who commanded him realized he was no longer controllable. And so, they did what cowards always did when faced with their own creation: they destroyed it. Or at least, they tried. The void pulsed, and suddenly he was back on the battlefield, but this time, he wasn't watching. He was there. The weight of the blazing sword in his hand felt familiar. Too familiar. Around him, enemies surged forward, faceless, endless. His heart pounded. Fear clawed at the edges of his mind. Not fear of death, but fear of remembering too much. A voice echoed again, Lady Sari's voice, though distorted by the void. This is not a trial to reclaim who you were, but to decide who you will be. The shadows closed in. The sword in his hand flickered, its blue flame dimming as doubt gnawed at him. Who was he without his past? A name? A title? A relic of a forgotten war? No. His grip tightened around the hilt. He wasn't a name. He wasn't a weapon crafted by fearful masters. He was survival incarnate. With a roar that tore through the suffocating dark, he swung the blade not at the enemies around him, but at the very fabric of the illusion. The void shattered like glass. Light poured in, blinding and pure, washing away the false battlefield, the echoes of betrayal, the chains of forgotten identity. When the brilliance faded, he stood alone in a chamber of crystal walls, heart racing, chest heaving. The sword was gone. The visions were gone. But something remained. Not a memory. A choice. Lady Sari's figure emerged from the shadows beyond the crystalline veil, her golden eyes studying him with unreadable intent. You didn't seek to reclaim your past, she said quietly, almost with a hint of respect. You destroyed it. He met her gaze, no longer hollow but burning with something fierce and untamed. Name and history mean nothing, he rasped, voice raw from the storm within. Her lips curved slightly. Then what do you have left? He stepped forward, shoulders squared, scars illuminated by the ethereal glow of the chamber. The will to survive. The instinct to fight. And the knowledge that I don't need a past to carve a future. For a moment, silence stretched between them, a mutual understanding forged not by words, but by the shared recognition of what it meant to stand alone against fate. As attendants approached to escort him to the next stage of the trials, Lady Ceres spoke one last time, her voice softer than before. A name can be given. A legend can be born. But only those who embrace the void within can truly endure. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because for the first time, the absence of memory wasn't a curse. It was freedom. What is a name, he whispered to himself, when war has stolen everything else? I don't need memories. I just need a reason to exist. And as the shadows of the next trial loomed ahead, the Forgotten One walked forward not as a relic of the past, but as a force that no one could erase. The chamber was silent, but he could feel them watching. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, graceful, deadly, and ancient in their authority. The Archon sisters. Not warriors today, but predators circling prey. The Forgotten One stood barefoot on the cold obsidian floor, scarred and shirtless, with nothing but his will to shield him. The second trial begins, Lady Ceres announced, her golden eyes gleaming under the ethereal light. To her right, Vel'Thara the middle sister stepped forward. Her emerald skin darker than Ceres, silver eyes calculating like a surgeon's blade. Beside her, Nerea the youngest smirked, sparks of electricity dancing along her fingertips, her turquoise skin shimmering with every pulse. No weapons, Vel'Thara's voice was calm, almost soothing. No armor. Just you, and everything you fear most. He didn't flinch. Nerea circled him first, her bare feet silent against the stone. You survived the mind's void, she whispered, her breath cool against his ear. But can you survive pleasure? A sudden jolt of electricity kissed his spine, not enough to harm, just enough to remind him she could. He turned his head slightly, gray eyes meeting her playful violet gaze. There was no reaction. No anger. No fear. Just the steady calm of a man too broken to care. Vel'Thara moved next, her presence like a shadow slipping beneath his skin. Her fingers brushed across his temple, and the world around him rippled. In an instant, the chamber transformed. He was no longer standing in a trial room. He was on his knees, bloodied and beaten, surrounded by faceless figures chanting his failure. This is what you are, Vel'Thara's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. A discarded tool. A forgotten mistake. The weight of despair pressed down on him, suffocating. His limbs felt heavy, his breath shallow. Memories real or fabricated flooded his senses, moments of defeat, betrayal, abandonment. Nerea's laughter cut through the illusion, sharp and mocking. Give in, she taunted, appearing before him in a vision, her hand trailing down his chest, leaving a trail of static in its wake. Wouldn't it be easier to just fall? To let us break you the way everyone else has? The Forgotten One's head hung low, his hair veiling his expression. His heart pounded not from fear, but from something deeper. A growing defiance. The sisters pressed harder. Vel'Thara twisted the illusion, showing him visions of endless failure, every path leading to ruin, every choice ending in death. Nerea's touch grew more invasive, her whispers dripping with cruel seduction. You're not a man, you're a ghost clinging to a corpse. And yet, nothing. No collapse. No surrender. A low breath escaped his lips, steadying like a warrior before battle. Then, he raised his head. His gray eyes, dull moments ago, now burned with quiet fury. You can't break what's already shattered, he said, voice like gravel and iron. The illusions flickered. Vel'Thara's silver eyes narrowed, her control slipping as cracks formed in the fabricated reality. Impossible, she whispered. Nerea snarled, her fingertips sparking violently as she gripped his jaw, forcing him to look at her. Feel something, damn you? He did. But it wasn't fear. It was clarity. With a sudden surge of will, he pushed forward, not physically, but mentally, shattering the illusion from within. The false world around him collapsed into shards of light. He stood once more in the obsidian chamber, breathing hard but undefeated. Nerea stumbled back, her playful smirk replaced by a scowl of frustration. Vel'Thara's composed demeanor cracked, a flicker of genuine respect crossing her features. Lady Ceres stepped down from her elevated platform, approaching him slowly. Her gaze searched his face not for weakness, but for understanding. "You didn't resist us because you're strong," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "You resisted because there's nothing left for us to manipulate." He said nothing, his silence more powerful than any boast. Ceres stopped mere inches from him, her golden eyes locking onto his. "You're not afraid of death, because you've never truly lived." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Fear requires hope," he replied quietly. "And hope died a long time ago." For a moment, Ceres simply stared at him, as if trying to decipher whether he was a tragedy or a triumph. She turned away, signaling the end of the trial. "Prepare him for the final test," she commanded, her voice steady but laced with thought. As the attendants moved in, Nerea crossed her arms, still glaring. "He's not fearless," she muttered. "He's empty." Vel'Thara, ever the analyst, nodded slowly. "And sometimes, emptiness is the hardest thing to conquer." As the Forgotten One was led away, his mind remained clear. He hadn't won because he was invincible. He'd endured because in the fractured maze of his mind, there was no room left for their games. He did not yield to fear, because to a man who has forgotten everything, death is just an empty word. And as the doors closed behind him, the sisters realized they weren't testing a broken man. They were awakening something far more dangerous. The alarms screamed before the doors could close behind him. Red lights bathed the obsidian walls in a violent glow as the ground beneath VelThara trembled. The Forgotten One barely had time to process the shift before armed attendants rushed past him, panic etched across their alien features. Lady Ceres' voice crackled through a nearby COMM panel, sharp and commanding. "Containment breach in Sector 12. The Krellet have awakened." The Krellet. Even without his memories, the word ignited a primal sense of dread in his chest. A name that didn't need context because survival instinct spoke louder than forgotten history. He pushed through the chaos, emerging onto a balcony overlooking the city. What he saw froze even his battle-hardened heart. A tide of metallic horrors poured through the streets, biomechanical parasites, their insectoid limbs clicking and whirring as they consumed everything in their path. Soldiers fired desperately, energy weapons flashing uselessly against adaptive shields. Civilians scattered like ants before a flood. "Modern weapons won't stop them," a voice spoke behind him. He turned to find Lady Ceres, now clad in battle-worn armor, her silver-white hair flowing freely, golden eyes scanning the devastation below. "Then what will?" he asked, his voice low and steady. For the first time, she hesitated. Then, without a word, she pressed her palm to a hidden panel embedded in the wall. A compartment slid open, revealing a weapon unlike any other sword, ancient yet alive, its blade dormant but pulsing faintly with an inner blue light. "The Starfire blade," she said softly. "Forged long before VelThara's rise. It only answers to those with a will, and the bloodline of a true warrior." He stared at the weapon, something deep within him stirring a recognition beyond memory. "Take it," Ceres urged, her voice now laced with urgency. "If you fail, there will be nothing left to remember." His hand closed around the hilt, In that instant, the blade ignited blue flames roaring to life along its edge, casting his scarred face in a ghostly glow. He didn't need to understand how. Some things were written not in the mind, but in the bones. Without another word, he vaulted over the balcony rail, landing hard 3 stories below. Pain shot through his legs, but he welcomed it. It reminded him he was still alive. The Krelid swarmed toward him, sensing fresh prey. He met them head-on. The Starfire blade sang through the air, cleaving metal and flesh with equal ease. Each strike sent arcs of blue fire cascading through the parasite ranks, severing limbs and shattering their once impenetrable defenses. For every creature that fell, 10 more surged forward. But he didn't slow. Because he couldn't. Because if he stopped, VelThara died. High above, Lady Ceres watched as the lone human carved a path through the impossible, her heart pounding not from fear, but from something dangerously close to hope. The Forgotten One moved like a force of nature, each swing of the blade more precise, more furious than the last. His scars burned, his muscles screamed, but his mind was clear. He didn't need to know who he was. He only needed to know why he fought. A mother clutching her child stumbled in the chaos, a Krelid leaping toward them. He was faster. The blade cut through the parasite mid-air, its corpse crashing harmlessly beside the terrified pair. "Run," he commanded, voice like thunder. They obeyed. But the swarm adapted quickly, shifting tactics, encircling him in a tightening ring of chittering death. From the corner of his eye, he spotted at the central node. A massive creature, twice the size of the others, its core pulsating with dark energy. The Queen. He charged, cutting down anything in his path. The Krelid threw themselves at him, but the Starfire blade burned brighter with every kill, feeding on the energy of his enemies. Reaching the Queen, he didn't hesitate. He drove the blade deep into its core. The creature shrieked a sound that split the air and rattled the bones. Tendrils of metal lashed out, wrapping around his arms and torso, trying to rip him apart or worse consume him from the inside. Pain lanced through his body, but he held firm, pushing the blade deeper, channeling every ounce of strength he had left. "If I fall," he growled through gritted teeth, "there's no one left to stand." With a final roar, the Starfire blade erupted in a burst of blinding blue flame, vaporizing the Queen from within. Across the city, the Krelid collapsed, lifeless husks hitting the ground in unison. Silence fell. The Forgotten One staggered, barely able to remain standing. The blade dimmed in his grip, its purpose fulfilled for now. Lady Ceres descended from her vantage point, approaching him as survivors cautiously emerged from hiding. Their eyes weren't filled with fear anymore. They were filled with awe. Ceres stopped before him, her golden gaze softer than ever. "You don't even know your name," she said quietly. He shook his head, breathing heavily. "I don't need to," he replied, looking over the city he'd saved. "Because if I hadn't stood today, there'd be no one left alive to remember it anyway." And in that moment, the Forgotten One became more than a relic of war. He became VelThara's last hope and its first legend in a new age. The world was quiet when he awoke. Not the silence of death, but the hush that follows survival. The Forgotten One opened his eyes to the soft glow of dawn filtering through crystalline windows. The scent of burning metal and scorched earth still lingered, but beneath it was something new, something he hadn't felt in, perhaps ever. Peace. His body ached with every breath, muscles torn and nerves frayed. Bandages covered half his torso, and faint blue energy pulsed along lines traced by ancient symbols. He wasn't alone. Standing around him were the Archon sisters, Lady Ceres at the forefront, flanked by Vel'Thara and Nereid. Gone were their battle stances and calculating gazes. In their place stood three figures of quiet reverence. "You almost didn't make it," Ceres spoke softly, her golden eyes reflecting both relief and something deeper. Vel'Thara stepped forward, her silver eyes scanning his vitals displayed on a hovering console. The neural damage was extensive, beyond what even our healers could mend. Nereid, arms crossed but visibly subdued, added, "We had to use the rite of renewal. A risk we don't take lightly." He shifted slightly, feeling the hum of unfamiliar energy coursing through him, not restoring what was lost, but forging something entirely new. "So," his voice was rough, but steady, "I'm still broken, just wired differently?" A rare smile tugged at Ceres' lips. "No. You're not broken anymore. You're chosen." Memories didn't return. Faces, names, and histories remained shadows beyond reach. But for the first time, that absence didn't feel like a void. It felt like a clean slate. The doors to the chamber slid open, revealing a panoramic view of VelThara. The city, though scarred by battle, stood tall against the horizon. People filled the streets not in fear, but in celebration. Whispers of the Savior and the Flame-Bearer drifted upward. Ceres walked to his bedside, placing a firm hand on his shoulder, a gesture not of command, but of camaraderie. "Your name doesn't matter," she said, her voice carrying the weight of a leader and the warmth of a companion. "What matters is that from this day forward, you stand with us to protect this world, not because of who you were, but because of who you chose to become." He followed her gaze toward the dawn-lit city. The Starfire blade rested against the wall nearby, dormant but waiting. For so long, he had been a weapon wielded by others. Now, he was something else. He pushed himself upright, ignoring the protests of his battered body. His gray eyes, once hollow, now held a quiet fire. "I don't need a past," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "I have a purpose." Vel'Thara nodded approvingly, while Nereid scoffed lightly, but even she couldn't hide the glint of respect in her eyes. Ceres extended her hand, helping him to his feet. Together, they stepped onto the balcony where the first rays of sunlight kissed the rebuilt spires of VelThara. Below, thousands looked up, not at a forgotten relic of war, but at the symbol of their survival. A nameless man who had faced oblivion and refused to fall. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of expectation settle on his shoulders, but this time, it didn't crush him. It lifted him. Ceres leaned closer, her voice a soft echo against the wind. "Legends aren't remembered for where they began, but for why they endure." He watched as children ran through the streets, laughter returning to a place once ruled by fear. Craftsmen repaired what was broken, banners rose in honor not of a man, but of a choice. His choice. The Starfire blade pulsed faintly in the distance, as if acknowledging that its bearer no longer needed a name to wield its power. "A legend doesn't need memories," he whispered, a faint smile crossing his lips. "A legend just needs a reason to keep going." And now, he had won. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light over a world reborn, the Forgotten One no longer lost stood beside those who had given him more than survival. They had given him hope. And with that, the first chapter of a new era began, not written in history books, but in the hearts of those who knew that sometimes, the strongest warriors are not the ones who remember, but the ones who choose to fight for a future worth remembering.